Welcome to the Sea Files, folks. Enjoy the ride. It's so beautiful out here right now. I thought I'd give you guys a look at the fall colors while we drive and talk. Let's come out of here. Still fighting this upper respiratory infection a little bit, but I'm probably about 90% from where I was. You'll see some beautiful colors, beautiful trees through here. Be shooting the Vortex Apologetic podcast here this weekend sometime, maybe tonight. We'll see. See what my partner has on his schedule. And I'll be starting back with the Bible reading, and I'll be doing some videos like this where we drive and talk. So let me just begin with a little bit of word of encouragement as you're looking at this beautiful scenery. I know it seems like things are getting kind of scary, dangerous, especially for Christians, conservatives. Excuse me. With what happened in New York with the election of Mamdani, a Muslim socialist, they're thinking, oh boy, the Muslims are going to take over New York. They're going to put it under Sharia law, and they're going to push socialism. It's going to bankrupt New York, and it's going to burden all the people under heavy taxes and everything. There might be some truth to that. I think that's ultimately the goal, for sure. But I would say that it's yet to be seen if that goal would ever be successful. Let me move this a little bit. There we go. There's going to be a lot of resistance to all of that. The United States is not a nation that's easily taken over. And mainly because we have 50 different states. And each state has a little bit of a different take on the political experiment. And some states are more socialist in the political experiment. Some are more capitalist and free enterprise. And they are always bickering with each other and disagreeing with one another. And that's the way the founders designed it. If a state came up with a great idea, then that state should be able to compete against the other states with that great idea and win over the industrial base, and win over the people, and get more population moving in and so forth. And that's how it was designed to work. So New York has decided that they're going to try socialism, and they're going to have a Muslim run the city. Which is always dangerous. Because let me explain a little bit about Islam, so people can understand it a little bit. Islam is a theocracy. We talk about theocracy sometimes when it comes to Christian nationalism and so forth. Christian nationalism is not theocratic. It really isn't. It's just wanting ethical government based upon Christian values. That's all Christian nationalism wants. Islam is different. The religion of Islam is tied in, inseparable from Sharia law, which is a form of government law. And so Islam is a state or a government, and it's a government that has as its state official religion the religion of Islam. Hopefully that helps you to understand a little bit about it. So in other words, they're not compatible with the Constitution. They're not compatible with any country's national laws. The goal of Islam is to destroy the governments and laws of any country that it enters, and to eventually replace that with Sharia law. That is the ultimate goal in New York City at this time. So, will they be successful? Well, they've been fairly successful in Dearborn, Michigan. I don't know how much of Sharia law they've been able to implement in Dearborn. I'll have to look into that. But I think they still are frustrated by the Constitution. But I think they've been able to implement some things. And really, there's really nobody challenging them. Now they want New York. New York is a big prize for the Muslims. That's a big prize. That's the biggest city in the United States. And to them, it's almost like taking the capital, almost like taking Washington, D.C. Pretty close. It's the financial center of the world, with Wall Street and all of that. And so, what a big prize that would be for them. Also, there's, I don't remember what they call it, but there's that planned city in Texas where they want to, basically make a Muslim city in Texas and get a stronghold into Texas. They really want Texas because they believe Texas, I guess they see Texas as being really the center of the country. And of course, Texas is, if you can take down Texas, that's a huge victory for the Muslims. Because Texas is, always talking about how they're true Americans, don't mess with Texas and all that kind of thing. And, if they can mess with Texas and be successful, to them, that's a huge victory. The rest of the country wouldn't be that difficult to take after that. Because you see, they do understand that much, that it's 50 different states they're going to have to take down in order to implement national Sharia law across the country. Well, that's quite a task, folks. Quite a task. I can guarantee you, you go into like Florida or Tennessee, they're going to have one heck of a time trying to deal with Florida or Tennessee, because those folks are not friendly toward Sharia law, and they will not hesitate to go to war against Islam. And you can call them Islamophobic till the sun goes down and the moon rises, and those folks, they're not going to care. That's not going to affect them. They will not care a lick about what you call them. They're going to be very single focused and set their sights on destroying Sharia law in their states. and they're not going to mess around with it. I guarantee you. You see, the old spirit, the old frontier spirit still lives in those areas, and especially in Appalachia, out in the Smoky Mountains and Blue Ridge Mountains. That's an area that will fight to the death to keep their way of life. Because it goes all the way back to the Scottish settlers that originally came here. And Appalachia actually speaks the Old English, the actual true Old English that they spoke when they first came and settled this land, which is really pretty interesting if you ever want to look into that. But that's kind of where we are right now. That truck took off, didn't he? Blowing that diesel. Anyway. That's kind of where we are right now in the country. So we have an internal battle that's going on, an internal fight. And we got a threat coming against us. And maybe I'll do some videos. I got a Quran at home, and I don't know if I have the Hadiths. I'll have to get those if I don't. Anyway, first I'd want to go through the Quran, kind of pick out some passages to kind of share with you, kind of explain to you, where their beliefs come from. And of course, the history of the Quran, where did it come from? How did we get it? Muhammad lived about 500 years after Christ. So and that's during a time when there was a big shift in Christianity as well. Well, not maybe a shift, but where Christianity really began to find its footing. It was about 500 years into it. You had the church councils that occurred. So Constantinople, and Council of Trent. Well, there's all these different councils. I got a book at home that can go through all of that too. I think that's a good book to go through as well. So I'm going to try to turn this into an educational channel to some degree. Kind of show you these things. Anyway, and we'll talk about the councils. Even the councils, the Christian church councils, can be controversial, and I'll talk about the controversies over them and basically what came out of them. But by 500 AD, Christianity had pretty much established pretty solidly through some councils that Christ was, the deity of Christ and the attributes of God and the position of the church, and some major doctrines of Christianity were established by that time. Well, that's about the same time that Muhammad came along. And Muhammad had originally stated that, well, the Jews, they're the experts on the scriptures. And if you ever meet a Jew, that Jew will immediately recognize me as being the prophet, right? Well, they ran into some Jews, and the Jews almost laughed him to scorn when he claimed to be a prophet. So then, he didn't care too much for the Jews after that, so he decided that he was going to push back on the Jews. So he had some nasty things to say about them. But then he said, well, now, the Christians will be our brothers. They will be the ones that we will be able to, join up with, and together we will bring in the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad and so forth. And then he actually ran into some Christians, and they rejected what he had to say. And so, well, the Christians are not that great either, And so the religion of Islam was formed off of what Muhammad had claimed concerning receiving the words of Allah, their God, and eventually it was oral at first, all oral by word of mouth for quite a while. Even after Muhammad had passed, the Quran had not been fully written. Muhammad couldn't read or write, either one. So whatever he did, he told the stories, and people memorized them. And you say, well, that's a problem. Well, actually, people were really good at memorizing things back then. They really were. That's how they had much better memories than we do, and they could quote things verbatim. They were. That's how they did it back then. So they were used to that, and it wasn't like the telephone game that we played when we were kids. These folks actually memorized what was spoken to them, and there might have been little variation here or there, with human error, if it's not guided by the Holy Spirit. And but it would stay fairly accurate to what the original person spoke. So, don't poo-poo oral tradition so easily, because they really did memorize those things. Well, eventually, those things got written down, and that became the Quran. First, there's like 111 chapters, and then there's like 116 chapters. It just depended on who you asked. And then some of the guys that had memorization of what Muhammad had told them died in battle, so some of that stuff was lost. But what was left, they eventually wrote it down, and the Quran eventually settled, at least the official Quran settled to 114 chapters. And but even today there are still some variations, right, in the Quran, different versions of it. So anyway, these are good things to know if you ever run into a Muslim. And so the bottom line is, I will eventually bring out some passages out of the Quran to show you that it does talk about this. The goal of Islam is to make the entire world Islamic. Now, Jews and Christians can get away, according to the Quran, with paying tribute. If they pay tribute, then they will be allowed to live, but they have to bow before Islam in the sense of paying tribute. But anyone who's not a Jew or a Christian, they're in a much worse condition, much worse situation when it comes to Islam. Even though Jews and Christians may be called infidels, they're also called people of the book, speaking about the Bible. And Muslims have a respect for the Bible, and so they give a little bit of leniency for those two groups. But anyone who's not people of the book, they're infidels, and they should be take it out, right? That's the belief of Islam. Now, when Islam is in a nation where they don't have a majority, where they don't have full control, and Sharia law has not been implemented yet, they call it being in Mecca, which means that they're at a disadvantage. And so they play nice, you know, and it always starts out with, oh, we'll give you free stuff. It's a pretty good little classic car right there. Anyway, we'll give you free stuff. And that's always the problem. And you know, that's what Muhammad did. You know, he started out by giving candy to the kids and all this kind of stuff, and you know, trying to win people over that way. But if you don't bend the knee, eventually the sword comes out, and there's conversions by the edge of the sword. And that's toward the second half of the Quran where it really starts becoming violent in that sense. The first part of the Quran is pretty peaceful. But anyway, that's how it works. So the goal is to get a Muslim majority in the United States by taking it city by city. And of course, they have a lot of kids. And you know, the liberals are not really having kids in the United States. Christians are doing pretty good. Christians are having kids. But the Muslims are outpacing everyone. And so the goal is to grow the Muslim population so that outnumbers the Christians and the unbelievers, and then by pure majority begin to rule the entire country piece by piece. And once they have power, then they're able to dissolve the Constitution, dissolve our current form of government, set up a caliphate, and you know, supreme leader or whatever, and implement Sharia law. So under Sharia law, anyone who's not converted to Islam would be eliminated, and any Christians or Jews that are not willing to pay tribute would be eliminated. So that's when you'd have a lot of destruction in the country. Maybe even a civil war type condition. Because some folks in the country are going to fight back. We know that. You know, people don't take up arms very easily. It has to be pretty dire conditions before people today will pick up arms and fight back. And, you know, it has to be a point where they have no other choice. It's the only way they're going to be able to protect their family, protect the community, and so forth. That's what the conditions would have to be before they do that. And so, where we're heading, I think that's the goal that they have. The question is, will they be able to be successful with it? Well, so far, they've been pretty successful with that strategy in other countries. The thing is, though, is that the United States is not like any other country. If we were like all the other countries, we wouldn't have been the rambunctious people that we are, and kicked out the British, and, fought a civil war, all the things that we've been able to do, we're kind of the, like Australia, they shipped all the criminals to Australia, so you wonder why is Australia so tough? Well, because they shipped the criminals to Australia. That was kind of like the penal colony, and so those folks they were pretty tough people. In the United States, we were the rebels, of the world. We were all the people that rebelled against all the other countries and said, we're going to go do our own thing, and we don't care what anybody else thinks about it. And anybody wants to come over here and try to mess with us, we're going to give them a bloody nose. That's the mentality that founded this country. Well, that mentality may have left us to some degree, but not 100%. We still have a certain amount of rambunctiousness in this country. And so you're going to run into pockets of resistance in America. Because like I said, you got to take all 50 states. And there are some states that are going to be very, very difficult to overrun, and to take back and to take down. But the strategy that Islam uses is overall very effective. But once Americans become educated on all of it, and they see what happens in like in New York City and in other areas, other states and so forth, then you begin to see that, and you go, wait a minute, something's not right here. Something's wrong. And so you start educating yourself. A lot of people will start educating themselves. And when that happens, there would be a rising resistance in the country. You see, I think the Achilles heel of the Muslim plan to take down America is that it will take too long. And that if you take too long to do something like that, and you guys let me know in the comment section if you think I'm wrong on this. If you take too long to do something like that in this country, well, you're going to find that resistance on a mass scale has already been implemented, and you're going to be up against one heck of a fight. You're going to be up against the fight that you may not be able to win. But one thing is for sure, after a few Americans have been lost, and Americans that have not been mesmerized and desensitized to all of this, but still have the old American spirit in them, they're going to fight to the death to protect their country, to protect their families, their communities, and put a stop to the push for Sharia law. And that's where the fighting, the kinetic fighting would probably come in. But I think initially it would be fought religiously, and it would be fought by lawsuits. Oh, they violated my constitutional rights for their Sharia law, I'm going to sue them. And so if they don't take the courts really quick and get control of that, then the courts will shut them down in the lawsuits. Oh, they violated my freedom of speech. Oh, they threatened my daughter because she wasn't wearing a hijab or whatever they call it, that clothing. where they cover from head to toe. They threatened my daughter, you know, or they injured my daughter, or they did something to her. Not only am I going to go after them criminally, I'm going to sue them. And that's where the Muslims are going to be in foreign territory, because they're not going to be well enough averse unless they really get good at where they get a bunch of Muslim lawyers. They're not going to be very good at navigating that one. And so I think that's where their Achilles heel will be. But I can tell you where I live, these folks out here that you see right now, they won't put up with it. These folks are Southern rebels. They're Southern country folk, and they ain't gonna be messing around, folks. I guarantee you. And so this could be a long haul. It could be a difficult time for the country. But I think if we stay true with the Lord and we pray for the protection of America, and we repent and we get right with God, that the Lord will protect us and help us through this. Thank you for watching. God bless. Hope you enjoyed the scenery and the drive. And I'll see you again here on the C-File.